At Northward Military Training Academy, excellence wasn't just expected, it was demanded. The walls dripped with tradition, the air thick with discipline. Young cadets walked the polished halls with starched collars, perfect posture, and eyes fixed on imagined futures full of medals and commands. To them, the world was theirs for the taking, and the man sweeping behind them, he barely existed. Samuel Sam Hartley had been working at the academy for nearly 7 years. Every morning before dawn, before a single cadet even stirred in their dorms, he had already punched in, checked his supplies, and started his quiet rhythm down the marble corridors. His uniform was always clean but plain, a gray custodial shirt with no name tag, dark blue pants, and an old black ball cap stitched with the word retired above a faded emblem most couldn't recognize. His face bore deep creases, his eyes were steady but distant, and his walk had a slight limp that whispered of old injuries. Still, no one ever asked, no one ever wondered. To most of the cadets, Sam was just the janitor, the one who cleaned up their spills, emptied their coffee cups, and made their messes disappear before inspection. Some cadets ignored him, others laughed behind his back. Not all of them, but enough to turn silence into sting. The brashest among them, boys born of generals, kids with polished shoes and polished names, mocked him openly. One called him Colonel Trash. Another joked he was lost on the way to the VA. But Sam never reacted. Day after day, he swept the floors, scrubbed the baseboards, and kept his silence. They thought his silence meant shame, that he was embarrassed by where life had landed him. They couldn't have been more wrong, because what they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was the truth. Sam Hartley wasn't ashamed. He was remembering. Every step he took echoed with stories no one asked about. Every time he looked up at the Academy's Hall of Honor, where black and white photos of legendary commanders lined the walls, his eyes would linger on one in particular. A young officer saluting in a sandstorm, face half obscured by grit, purpose burning in his stance. Sam would pause for a breath. Then he'd move on. Back to his mop, back to invisibility. But things were starting to shift. The disrespect, the mocking, it was getting worse. There was a storm building inside those walls, a test of character none of the cadets even realized they were about to face. And when it hit, they wouldn't be the ones teaching the lesson. They'd be the ones learning it. The week leading up to the Academy's annual leadership symposium was always tense. Cadets polished boots until the leather gleamed, rehearsed their salutes in dorm mirrors, and whispered speculations about who the keynote speaker might be. Rumors flew about a four-star general, maybe even a decorated war hero from the old days. But no one gave a second thought to the old man pushing his janitor cart down the hall. Sam Hartley continued his routine like always. He swept quietly as cadets strutted by, barely acknowledging his presence. They laughed louder that week, tried harder to impress each other, and somewhere in that hunger for recognition, their cruelty found sharper edges. It started small. A spilled cup of coffee left without apology, a banana peel dropped deliberately in his path, crumpled napkins tossed with careless aim. Sam said nothing. He cleaned it all with his usual quiet grace. But then came Landon Briggs, second-year cadet, Southern accent, son of a colonel, quick with a grin and quicker with mockery. He was used to being the loudest in any room and getting away with it. One morning in the cafeteria, as chatter filled the space and trays clattered against tabletops, Sam pushed his mop down the aisle between the food stations. Landon spotted him, nudged a friend, and smirked. Then, with exaggerated clumsiness, Landon knocked over his breakfast tray right in Sam's path. Eggs, toast, and orange juice splattered across the floor. "Oops," Landon said loudly. "Looks like we got a situation here. Soldier." Laughter broke out. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. Enough to echo off the tile floors and bounce around Sam's ribs like stray shrapnel. One cadet even saluted mockingly as Sam bent down. But Sam didn't flinch. He didn't glare. He didn't even look up. He just reached for his cloth and began wiping up the mess, one stroke at a time, as if the moment meant nothing at all. And maybe to him, it didn't, because Sam Hartley had cleaned up after war. A few cadets added to the pile, empty cups, crumpled wrappers. Landon stood nearby, arms crossed, watching like a man proud of his performance. But the act wasn't done. That night, when Sam returned to his cart after cleaning the west stairwell, he found a printout taped to it, a fake application form from a prank site. Job application, senior custodial commander. Under the skills section, someone had written, advanced trash deployment, mop foo, stealth broom ops. Sam stared at it for a moment. Then he folded the paper cleanly, tucked it into his coat pocket, and went back to work. Not a word, because Sam Hartley wasn't surprised. He had lived through jungles that never got quiet. He had seen comrades fall. He had walked through fire and come home alone. A few jokes in a hallway couldn't rattle the bones of a man who had carried the weight of silence for decades. But that silence was about to end. Because while the cadets laughed, someone else had been watching. And soon someone else would be walking through those academy doors. Not with jokes, not with coffee, but with a truth so sharp it would slice through every smug smirk in the room. The lesson was coming, and no one, not even Landon Briggs, was ready for it. The morning of the symposium arrived with military precision. Uniforms were crisp, boots were mirror-shined. The air at Northward Academy buzzed with tension and anticipation. This was the biggest event of the year, the annual Leadership Symposium, and cadets had spent weeks preparing for it like it was a battlefield of its own. Rumors had been confirmed. The guest of honor was none other than General Marcus Denning, a legend in modern military circles. A four-star general, former leader of elite covert units, and a man whose mere name could straighten spines. Chairs were perfectly aligned. Banners hung from the rafters. Cadets filed into the Grand Assembly Hall, their faces stern, jaws set, minds focused. The entire academy seemed to inhale as the double doors creaked open. But before the general's entrance, in a hallway just beyond the main doors, Sam Hartley was moving like always. He wasn't rushing. He never did. His mop leaned gently against his cart, and his cap, black with retired stitched in white, cast a soft shadow across his face. He paused for a moment, or just out of view from the crowd, and looked toward the closed doors. He could hear the rustle of uniforms, the whispers, the electric buzz of ambition. Then he turned away and began pushing his cart toward the east corridor. But inside the hall, the moment had come. The doors swung open, not quietly but with controlled force. General Marcus Denning entered, tall, broad-shouldered, composed like a storm cloud just before the first crack of lightning. His metals gleamed, but his expression was neutral. Salutes snapped across the room. Instructors stood. Cadets rose to attention like dominoes. Phones clicked. Not a breath was wasted. But instead of walking to the stage, General Denning kept moving, straight down the center aisle, past the admiring gazes, past the flags, past the generals and colonels who waited for his speech. He walked right out the door again. The audience murmured, confused, frozen. Outside, Sam had just rounded the corner with his cart when he heard the doors open behind him. Footsteps, not hurried, but deliberate. He stopped and turned. General Denning stood before him, and then the general snapped to attention and saluted. Not casually, not symbolically. It was a full, formal regulation salute. The kind of salute one soldier gives another when rank no longer matters. Only respect. The hallway went dead silent. A few cadets had followed, peeking from the doorway. Their jaws slackened. Denning held the salute a moment longer, then dropped it and said firmly, "Sir, it's an honor to finally meet you in person." Gasps echoed down the hall. The word hit hard, "Sir." Sam blinked slowly, and for the first time in anyone's memory, he returned the salute, with perfect precision. His hand didn't shake. His eyes didn't waver. It was automatic, muscle memory from another life. Denning turned to the cadets gathering at the door. "I'll begin my speech inside," he said, "but not before you understand who you've walked past every day without knowing." Now inside the hall, Denning stood before the podium. "I came here to talk about leadership," he began, "but the man who taught me what leadership truly means is standing outside, pushing a mop." Murmurs again, eyes wide. "You know him as a janitor? I know him as Commander Samuel Hartley, the man who led Operation Deliverance and saved the lives of over 200 American soldiers, including mine, during a mission no one here has clearance to fully read." He paused. "His name has never been carved into this academy's walls, but without his sacrifice, most of my career wouldn't exist." At the name Hartley, one cadet visibly flinched. Landon Briggs. He remembered the tray, the banana peel, the oops. Now shame poured down his face like cold water. Denning continued, "This institution prides itself on producing warriors. But if you cannot recognize greatness without a rank on the shoulder, then you've learned nothing." Sam stepped quietly into the hall then. He didn't puff his chest or bow his head. He simply stood, looking over the crowd with the quiet gravity of someone who had seen war, and walked out carrying the memories of those who hadn't. Denning gestured toward him. "Sir, would you share a few words?" Sam hesitated. Then finally he stepped forward. "I won't speak for long," he said, voice steady. "Not for me, but for the ones who never came home." The room fell into complete, reverent silence, and for the first time, the cadets of Northward Academy truly listened. Samuel Hartley stood still for a long moment at the front of the hall. There were no microphones, no spotlight, no cue cards. Just a mop-worn janitor in a gray uniform, standing beneath a banner that read, "Honor, Leadership, Legacy." And somehow, for the first time in Northward Academy's history, those words didn't feel like decorations. They felt like a mirror. Sam's eyes moved slowly across the faces of the cadets, some pale with embarrassment, others red with shame. Landon Briggs sat stone still, hands clenched on his thighs, unable to meet the old man's gaze. Sam finally spoke, his voice low but unwavering. "I've seen leaders fall, not because they weren't strong, but because they forgot where they came from. I came back home carrying ghosts, not glory. I didn't return to be remembered. I came here to stay close to something that still meant something to me. Service, Dio." There was no dramatics in his tone, no need for applause. He spoke like a man who had earned the right to be quiet, and because of that, every word landed like stone. He continued, "Some of you mocked me, called me things, laughed. That's fine. I've seen worse. But I'll tell you what lasts. Not your class ranking, not your medals, not your family names. What lasts is how you treat people when no one's watching." A few cadets lowered their heads. "In war," Sam added, "you don't follow someone because they look sharp or talk loud. You follow them because they show up. They don't leave you behind, and they never act like they're better than the lowest man in the unit." He paused, breathing in the silence. "I was that lowest man once, and I rose, not because I asked to, but because I had to." He looked to General Denning, who stood off to the side, chest tight with pride. The general gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Sam finished, "Don't salute uniforms. Salute integrity, because that's the only thing that can survive a battlefield." And with that, he stepped back. No grand exit, no call for thanks. But what followed was something deeper than applause. One by one, cadets began to stand, not instructed, not signaled, simply moved. They rose silently, and then, starting from the front row, a single cadet brought his hand to his brow in salute, then another and another, until the entire hall, over 200 future officers, stood in complete silence and saluted the man they had once dismissed. Sam didn't return it immediately. He looked across them like a father watching over sons and daughters he never had. Then finally he raised his right hand and returned the salute, not out of habit, but as a quiet acceptance of what had just changed. General Denning spoke next, but his voice was softer now, humbled. "Let this be your first true lesson in leadership. Before you earn a stripe or command a squad, learn to see the people around you, the quiet ones, the forgotten ones, because they may carry more courage than any of us ever will." That afternoon, Sam returned to his routine. He pushed his cart down the same hallway, mop creaking slightly as it leaned to one side. But this time, cadets stepped aside. They held the door open. They nodded respectfully. They didn't see a janitor anymore. They saw a man who had already walked through fire, quietly, and come back not for recognition, but to remind them what respect truly looked like. And quietly, everything changed. The week after the symposium, Northward Military Training Academy didn't return to normal. Not completely. The halls still gleamed, cadets still marched, drills still echoed across the parade grounds. But something invisible had shifted. It was in the way cadets paused when passing by a janitor, in the quiet respect that followed a simple nod, in the questions whispered late at night about who else they'd overlooked. Samuel Hartley didn't change anything in his routine. He still clocked in before dawn, still moved slowly with his cart, still wore the same gray custodial shirt and weathered black cap. But now, wherever he went, he was no longer invisible. The morning after the symposium, someone left a small, folded note on his cart. It read, "Thank you for what you did then and what you still do now. Cadet M. Evans." He tucked it into his coat pocket, right next to that prank application they once left. One symbol of cruelty, the other of gratitude. Both folded the same, but only one truly carried weight. Later that month, the Academy quietly dedicated a new display case in the Hall of Honor. No grand ceremony, no cameras, just a glass frame mounted near the photo of that young soldier saluting in the sandstorm. Inside the case, an old black cap with retired embroidered in white, a set of bronze service ribbons, long since dulled by time, and a single mop handle, polished smooth by years of quiet use. The plaque beneath it read, "Samuel Hartley, Commander, Custodian, Leader, Never Forgotten." Cadets stopped and stared when they passed it. Some read it twice, a few saluted. General Denning returned once more before his retirement, not for another speech, just to walk the halls with Sam one last time. "You still don't like attention, do you?" Denning asked as they stood by the plaque. Sam chuckled quietly. "Never did, just wanted to be useful." "You've been more than that," Denning replied. "You reminded them that real rank isn't on the shoulder, it's in how you carry yourself." They stood in silence for a while, two soldiers, two generations, bound not by medals, but by understanding. As Denning left, Sam returned to his closet at the end of the East Hall. He hung up his coat, placed the cap gently on the shelf, and turned off the light. No spotlight ever followed him. But in every cadet who now walked those halls with more humility, a part of Sam's legacy marched on. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you with us. Each day we share quiet moments that remind us what still matters. You can subscribe below to join us.